I think I'm saying that we struggle all our lives to answer it. That it's the struggle that is important. That's what helps us to define our place in the universe.
This is Beverly, Dr. Beverly, Dr. Beverly Crusher. Honest,
Forceful,
trusting,
brilliant,
strong.
and adventurous.
And this is Crusher Combo.
Hello, guys, and welcome to Crusher Combo, where we are crushing the conversation one episode at a time. Today, we celebrate Star Trek Day by getting stuck in our own causality loop. And I am joined by a fellow Trekkie who's part of a fabulous trio on the It's Got Star Trek podcast. Welcome, Patrick, and thank you for joining me on this crazy loopy of an episode.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you. Now, I had you last season and we discussed the game, so I'm hoping this is a better episode for you.
This is actually one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek ever. So
Ever, yes.
Ever.
That's
not
why
just TNG. It's a great episode.
It is a great episode. And I found out that this actually came out like a year before the movie Groundhog Day came out.
Yeah, almost exactly. This was March 23rd, 92, I think. And Groundhog Day was February something, 93.
Wow. See, they were ahead of their time. Like they just knew where they were going. So this is perfect because not only are you on my show to discuss your favorite episode, but I get to go on your show to discuss my favorite episode. So we're going to be talking about Attached, and that's going to be out tomorrow. So super excited about that one. So much fun with you guys. Always a blast. So today we are discussing the best of Groundhog Day episodes in sci-fi and maybe some not so sci-fi. But first, let's start off with the best in TNG, cause and effect.
My Aunt Adele cured a lot of sleepless nights with this steamed milk.
Thank you. Nutmeg.
Whenever I get insomnia, I try to perfect the recipe.
It was the eeriest feeling. When the glass broke, it triggered the sensation even more intensely than I'd done it all before.
You know, earlier, I was reading this book, and I had the distinct feeling that I'd read certain paragraphs before, but I assumed that I'd read the book years ago and I'd forgotten.
I've had this feeling for hours. And then the voices.
Well, it could be nothing more than the result of a sleepless night, but let's be sure. Have Data and Geordie run a shipwide diagnostic, concentrating on the time and place when you heard the voices. And we'll discuss the results tomorrow at 700 hours.
Thank you. For everything.
Oh, thank Aunt Adele.
Shocker, that was the my clip that I shared with you guys today. But here is the cause and effect. It was season 5, episode 18, written by Brandon Braga, directed by Jonathan Frakes, and like Patrick said, premiered on March 23rd, 1992. You are a fan. You knew the date.
I did. I looked it up earlier today.
You're not supposed to tell your secrets, Patrick. You're supposed to be like, no, I remembered it the whole time.
Oh, no, yeah. Totally. I remembered it ever since I saw that episode live in 92, which I did. I started watching TNG on the regular as it came out in the third season, sometime in the third season. So I definitely watched this probably the day it was first available in syndication in my area.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask you. So when you first saw this episode, what was your reaction to it?
Oh, I've loved this episode since the first time watching it. I would have been about 12 at the time, probably had just turned 12. And it's been talked about ad nauseum, but that opening teaser, I mean, how do you beat that opening teaser where the Enterprise D gets blown to smithereens? I mean, it's amazing. And it's, it's such a unique idea for a time travel story, which I guess is what Brandon Braga has said in interviews that he was going for. He liked time travel, but it had been done a lot of times. And how do you do it in a way that hadn't been seen before. Certainly, it was not like a common thing that you'd seen, and then of course to get Jonathan Frakes involved to give him the challenge of trying to do this in a way that's not boring, because you could imagine a version of this episode that would be visually and sort of structurally from a storytelling standpoint, repetitive, and they managed to avoid that. And that's really, really impressive. And I think even at the time, my young mind was probably just blown away. But as I've gotten older and gotten more interested in and educated in literary criticism and media criticism and things like that, this is one of those episodes that it does not get worse over time. It gets better. The writing, the scene you showed is such a cozy scene and so well written. Fifth season between these two characters, to watch them cozying up and giving each other sort of solace and advice. It's just fantastic.
They literally hit all the nails on the head when it came to every little detail, like mentioning with Crusher, for instance, or even just Beverly, noticing something, or Data, or like every single person except for Troy and Worf. Those are the only two characters that really didn't have a lot to do with this episode. But besides that,
Troy at one point is even like, "Oh, don't worry, everything's fine." And you're like,
"It's fine, no big deal."
No, it's not fine.
But even with, like you said, the direction of it, every time they went into that loop, it was going back to the poker game. It was going back to her quarters. It was Geordi at sick bay, like all that. But it was just slightly different to make you not look away.
And you mentioned the poker game, and it's almost like an in joke there. I forget if it was Brandon Braga or Michael Piller. So somebody on the show was mentioning that the poker game was something that they had been going back to a lot when they needed to fill some time. They're like, "Oh, this script is like a minute short. We'll write a poker scene," and to the point where they actually had stopped using it as much because it had become a bit of a TNG cliche. And so in this episode, not only did they get to use it again, but it had a plot purpose, and they just kept repeating it. So the joke was they had to stop doing it because they were repeating it. And now in this episode, I forget how many times they did it. What, 5-6 times going back to the poker thing?
I think. Yeah. So literally for each act.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think, but it was such a nice little touch. And again, it's funny how, we had Worf in it, but we didn't have Troy. And typically it's all of them at the poker, but it was only them 4. So it was interesting just how they put the characters in their place, and it worked so well. And of course, I love it because Beverly Crusher's the hero. I'm just saying.
She's absolutely the hero of this episode. That's another thing that probably appealed to me, to young me, was, and I think I probably mentioned this last time I was on your show, was that I always looked up to Beverly. She was sort of this, the epitome of the problem solver and helper. And that was very comforting and quite frankly attractive. It's this hyper intelligent, hyper empathetic person, but also intuitive. And the thing about this episode is it hinges entirely on her intuition, that she's the one to start to realize something's going weird, and has the tenacity and perseverance to just keep at it, not only in one time loop, but in all the time loops. She's the motivating factor.
Yeah. And that's when a lot of fans say, well, now we know where Wesley got his special powers from. There was always something. Beverly always had a sixth sense. It was always, we always noticed it in a lot of episodes. This one, though, really showcased that she really had an intuition, and a good one. And that's what makes her a good doctor. That's what makes her a good mom, a good friend. Like, she has all those wonderful traits to her character. And this really highlights it. Now, not many people think Cause and Effect is a Beverly Crusher episode, but especially because at the end, it's like Data saved the day. Well, he kind of did with the help of Beverly and Geordi, but it's one of those things where she really had a lot to do with this. And they're following her trying to figure out what's going on. Why does this seem familiar? The whole deja vu constantly, where she kept asking everybody, questioning them. did you? I'm getting a little sense here. Are you feeling me here? And one loop, Jordy says no. Next loop, Jordy says yes. So it's just interesting how some of the characters didn't follow through in every loop, but she was the consistency.
Absolutely.
Right?
Everything hinges on her. And I've had that same impression as you, that many people don't count this among, like, if you ask for a list of like top Beverly episodes, many people will ignore this episode even if they like the episode themselves. And I think a lot of it is that they ascribe the solution to Data's quick thinking at the end, but Data's the one who was causing the problem in the first place, right? He had the wrong idea. I won't say bad idea. It just turned out to not be the effective idea.
Was the reason why they were dying.
Yeah. So he effectively, covered up his own mistake. It's sort of like I know he's an android. It's sort of a typically white male thing to do. He's an extremely white male. I love Data, but it's just always
very Dr.
funny.
Soong. That's when Dr. Soong comes out.
Yeah, it's very funny in this episode where it's like, okay, he was the one who resolved things in the very end, but because of all the work that Beverly put in, and it's not just the implied work, it's she's on camera almost the whole time. We see scenes of her alone. I think she's one of the few people we see Picard alone in his room a little bit, but for the most part, she's the center of the focus of this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is a good little segue for the ending part. And so this is where I'm going to do my Enigma Check It Out. So as you said earlier, Braga, who said he'll always wanted to do a time travel story with the cliche of the screwed up timelines, called this solo story the smoothest he had yet worked on, though it provided a challenge in drawing out the subtleties of the varying time loops. Now, of course, Kelsey Grammer makes an appearance at the very end, becoming the third Cheers actor to enter the universe. He says, but his view screen scenes were all shot separately from the rest of the cast, again, using the old movie bridge set redressed. The staff had wanted the first officer on the right of Bateman to be Kirstie Alley as Lieutenant Savick, but the scheduling couldn't be worked out. So that would have been really interesting, though, to see that.
Although it's kind of funny too that why wouldn't she be the captain at this stage, right? Because it was, I mean, I don't know if the timeline works out actually. It's 2278. Unfortunately I didn't look this up. Because I think that might be before Wrath of Khan, after motion picture, before Wrath of Khan.
You're asking the wrong person when it comes to TOS.
Well, in that case, then she would have been a cadet and oughtn't have been on the bridge regardless. Anyway, I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, those are all fascinating thoughts there.
Your listeners and viewers, they will know. Nemechek would know. Dr. Nemechek would definitely know.
Yes. Comment below, guys. Let us know that. And I'm sure Dan and Jesse are going to be like, Patrick, what the heck? Why aren't you? Now, I did want to mention, so I have 2 scripts that I got. These are legit scripts from producers and things like that. And this one, so I got Cause and Effect.
Oh, that's so cool.
So there it is. From, okay, you're going to have to help me out here. Renee
Echeverria?
Echeverria?
With the caveat that I've only ever read the name and I don't know that I've ever heard somebody pronounce it.
I don't think I have either, which is probably why I freak out when, as you heard earlier, just trying to read Nemechek's section. I struggle with pronouncing words, unfortunately, but I try. I do my best. It's funny because it seems pretty straightforward as what we saw in the show. And I think it's because there's really not much to change, right? Because they had to kind of keep it consistent, but not change it too much. Otherwise, it would either be too drastically different or it would be too similar, I would think, right?
Yeah.
But of course, I was looking at all of this. And what was funny is Brandon Braga had mentioned that on the commentary for Cause and Effect, he had done the scene, and who was he with? I think he might have been with Ronald D. Moore. But he had mentioned about that Crusher scene that we saw earlier, and he was saying, he's like, it was very cutesy and flirty, right? He's like, I didn't write it that way. It's like, that was just them. It was like, that was literally Gates and Patrick doing all of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's really, I mean,
I didn't, but you know, that makes sense. And that makes the scene even more charming.
I mean, when you're watching this though, like it says Picard hands her a cup of steaming liquid, and then
Steaming liquid.
Steaming liquid. I guess they didn't know what they
specify spiced milk.
No. Well,
steaming liquid.
With the steamed milk, they mention it. She says, takes a sip, let it warms her. She's like, nutmeg, like we saw. Beverly smiles, then collects her thoughts, which is, what we noticed. I think here, saying that she's feeling a little bit better. She takes a sip. She gives a gentle smile. So I think there's little hints of, I don't know what Brennan thought he was writing, but they took what it said and they ran with it, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Gates and Patrick. But yeah, I thought this was a gold mine. I have this and attached, so which I brought up in our conversation on your show. But it's just always interesting comparing the scene versus what was written. I compare Sub Rosa between the script and the actual episode constantly, just to
and I remember well, because you talked about that not too long ago with Danny, right? And I mean, that's a good example of one that does show up on a lot of lists. And sometimes people say, "Oh, it's a terrible episode." Other times, as you argue, there is very interesting stuff in there, and particularly from Gates McFadden, who is just does a great job with what she's given. And it's kind of interesting if you just isolate her performances across the whole series. There can be clunker episodes, there can be brilliant episodes like Cause and Effect, but she is always strong, right? She's strong
every time.
And I think there's always such a benefit when an episode focuses so much on her for precisely that reason. Now, this episode is very well written and the concept is really interesting. So that, of course, adds to it. But it is made so much stronger that because they could have totally done this with made it a Data episode or a Geordi episode. They have sci-fi reasons why they might be the ones to kind of figure out what's going on. And I really enjoyed them being in the more supporting role where they were their strengths came to the fore, but they weren't the ones who were motivating all the action. They were helping along as problem-solving team members.
Yeah, and I think that was what was great too, is that they were, as you said, as a team. They were working as a team. They were working together. She was trusting them too, specifically because she's all like, something's going on and they're going to help me figure it out. And since Wesley had left the ship, she became, what did Cameron call them? Like the Nerd Squad? Yeah, that was Cameron's way of calling them on Green Shirt. They were the Nerd Squad. It was Data, Geordi, and Wesley. Yeah. Well, Beverly took over for Wesley when Wesley left. And so you always see those three working together because Beverly's not just a doctor. She is also a scientist. I love it when they highlight those moments of her. But like you said, there's horrible episodes out there. What is the one with When the Bow Breaks? Right. There's Deep Throat stealing children. Right. And it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But her performance was great. Yeah. Because, she's trying to get her son back, or even Justice. Right. Everyone makes fun of Justice, obvious reasons. But she's like, my son's about to die, and she is in tears and she is desperate to try and save him. And those are the moments where I'm like, this is why I like this episode. Yes. Because of those moments. And it's the same with Sub Rosa. I mean, she just went off the script. She's like, okay, they're telling me to be a drug addict. Okay. And that's what she did. So I'm going to go ahead and share the clip that you wanted for me to show, and then we'll discuss why you like it.
Crusher to Commander LaForge.
LaForge here.
Geordi, I just heard what sounded like voices in my room, but no one else is here.
Sensors just picked up something strange, too. We're checking it out.
I'm on my way.
Fantastic.
You have the floor.
All right. Well, first I'm going to take a little sip off of my little aperitif glass, like Dr. Crusher. Unlike her, I'm not going to down the entire thing.
Because that was not synthahol, is it?
It is not. No. But one reason why I really like that scene, I like the whole arc of those scenes where first she goes to bed and hears the voices and knocks the glass off in the initial time loop, and that's just creepy. And it starts with her being so cozy and comfortable, and then it shifts suddenly, and it's so emotional when you're watching it because you hear those voices and you're like, Jesus, what's going on? Yeah. And in this version of it, this is the best part. I mean, this is the culmination of that arc where she's doing all this amazing stuff without saying a single word, which always impresses me. The ability of excellent actors to convey so much through facial expression and body movement, and just the way they, the choices they make, and where she puts the glass down in a different place than she usually does, that sort of thing. But then what's great is this scene, just like the first scene shifts from being cozy and warm and comforting into creepy. This scene starts out as creepy. She's upset. She's disturbed. As soon as the voices come in, instead of it continuing to be creepy, she immediately springs into action and starts recording. And it's a mirror image of that first version through the time loop. And this is where she gets that data that eventually helps them ultimately resolve the issue and figure out what's going on. And again, mostly done silently, and then to top it all off, breaking the glass anyway, which I think is so clever. And I think there's another thing Brandon Braga mentioned in an interview, was that one of the things that was the latest in the script, that it was latest additions to the script, was the breaking of the glass motif throughout the whole thing, to sort of connect those scenes together. I love that, including in that very last one where it's just over audio, where they hear the Data and Geordi hear her over the comm system break the glass, and they're like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm fine."
I'm fine. Yeah. No, I like that one too, because at this point she is sensing something is going on, right? That every little thing that she's doing in her room, she's unsettled.
Yeah.
Right. Just even like, oh, let me clip my orchids. Nope, not going to do that. Right. Yeah. And she puts it down. So what was interesting though, as you said, I love in this particular section, I do love the wine, because she was like, I'm going to put it over here. Like she's trying to break that loop, not realizing she's in a loop, but just,
it's a subconscious thing. I'm trying to do something different.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that deja vu feeling. You're trying to break that deja vu feeling.
Yes. And that was what was interesting. And then when she was so excited to go to Geordi, she, again, like you said, she just breaks the glass anyways, but in a different way. So this is what I liked about the episode, is because everything is still happening. Breaking up the glass, the clipping of the orchids, all these different things, but even in a different way, it still happens.
Yeah.
Right. So, I thought that was very, very well done. I was trying to look in the script because I was curious what it might have said about, here it is. Perfect. It says here, Beverly sits down and picks up the glass of water. That wasn't water. From the nightstand and takes a sip. She stares at the glass with dread certainty. The glass is going to break. She stands, crosses the room, sets the glass on the counter as if to say, this time it will not break. She returns to bed, turns off the lamp, and lays down. She is too anxious to rest. Softly in the darkness, and she could barely hear a voice being heard. Beverly sits up, gradually a dozen voices. She turns on the lamp. She gets an idea, stands and grabs the tricorder, hits the button, and aims the tricorder in the air. The voices fade away. Beverly takes a breath. She talks to Geordi. She says, okay, I'm on my way. Tricorder in hand, Beverly crosses the dresser, grabs her smock and accidentally knocks over the glass. It
Mhm.
breaks on the counter. Beverly stares at the glass astonished.
Yeah.
So like she just had that intuition, right? Which Beverly always has that intuition, which is why it always made her a great character. Now I did reach out to my listeners, and this is the penny for your thoughts.
Penny for your thoughts.
Now, I asked my listeners of what they thought were great sci-fi groundhog episodes, movies, whatever. I did get a couple of responses, and I also kind of cheated and went on Screen Rant, and they had their own list.
Mm.
So there's maybe one episode here that's not necessarily sci-fi, but these apparently are all great episodes, and I have seen half of these. So Stargate SG-1 Window of Opportunity, that was that Jay had mentioned. I did see Charms Deja Vu all over again. That is a really good one. 12 Monkeys Lullaby, X-Files Monday, that was one of my picks. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., As I Have Always Been, and Russian Doll, all of season 1, and that actually came from Riley.
Yeah.
So it was very, very interesting because I was kind of looking to see if there was any other Star Trek ones, because as much as I've seen a little bit of TOS, I have seen DS9, and I just finished Voyager. I'm going into Enterprise, but I wasn't sure if I might have missed anything, or, you know, because cause and effect is always like in my brain.
It looms large.
It was large, right? Yeah. But I didn't see anything else.
I don't think there's, I don't know.
Star
Yeah,
Trek.
I mean, in terms of time loops, I don't know. I'm trying to think if, you know, maybe there was hints at it and maybe Lower Decks or something, but off the top of my head, nothing that quite fits this mold or the mold of some of the episodes you just were listing that the listeners suggested. Which of those, I haven't seen all of those. Russian Doll is fantastic. And you know, is it sci-fi? I don't know, but it's still basically the same kind of concept. But
Right.
X-Files Monday, I mean, that's another one. Yeah, like that would be at the top of my list as a good example. I mean, I almost assume that the producers and writers were doing a riff off of Cause and Effect in a way. I know it goes in its own direction, but it is similar, but it's also very well executed. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah. Now, I asked you to pick two choices of your favorite time loop, and I picked two choices. So I'm going to go first. And as we were just mentioning, my first pick was Monday from X-Files.
Would you sacrifice yourself?
Don't go in the bank.
I'm sorry, do I know you?
To change the future?
She said that we'd die.
Something very bad is going to happen here today.
Some of my agents might be in there.
Doesn't have to end like this.
Yeah, it does.
The X-Files, an all-new episode, Sunday at 9, 8 Central on Fox.
Brilliant.
I love those TV promos.
I love them too.
Brings back memories. Now, this particular episode, if anyone's not sure what happened, there is a time loop that is happening. And Mulder is basically Beverly in this episode. He is sensing something is up. Every time he goes into a bank, he has to do a check. Scully follows him in. There is a bank robbery. He blows up. They all die and start over. Okay, so that's basically what happens. But there is one girl who remembers every time they start over, because she is the reason of why this is happening. And spoiler alert, the reason that they stopped it was instead of Mulder getting shot and dying and the place blowing up, she ended up getting shot, and that's what stopped it. So, but that was also another good example about how they were also going into the loops, but they would slightly change it just a little bit to kind of keep you engaged enough, but then still things were still happening the same way.
Yeah.
Right. Like the break-in of the glass scenario with Beverly. But this was always a favorite of mine. I think this happened in season 6 of X-Files. So definitely years later after Cause and Effect, and also Groundhog Day, the movie. But what is your impression or your thoughts about Monday that you like?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, for the same reasons you cite, it's well performed, it's well written, and it's a whole different universe, of course, and it's Mulder and Scully, and part of it I think is also just sort of fun to see Mulder in a bank. I don't know why. It's just X-Files, we're so used to the big trees of the outside of Vancouver. And just as a side note, I live and grew up in the Northern Virginia, Washington D.C. area, and tons of X-Files episodes would the chyron at the bottom would say Falls Church, Virginia, or Annandale, Virginia, and then it would be some lonely road with 200-foot tall pine trees. It does not look like that around here. But yeah, I think the setting was interesting, and as you said, like in Cause and Effect, the way it was directed and performed, they did a really good job of keeping you engaged while having that loop style, keeping up with the loop. And like Cause and Effect, there's not much extra to it. It's sort of a straightforward story. And by that, I mean, when we think of Groundhog Day, when we think of the choices I'm going to talk about and some of those other TV episodes, a lot of them use the time loop as to sort of meditate on a sort of a philosophical position, becoming a better person, or letting go of regrets, or whatever. There are a number of themes that might come up, but Cause and Effect, it's sort of just a straightforward, like, oh, we're stuck in a time loop. How are we going to get out of it? You're learning about the characters from the fact that they're problem solving, but the time loop is incidental to that. And I think Monday is similar in that it's just a good episode of X-Files. And there's not this extra philosophical meditation. Not that I have a problem with that. I actually love that about a lot of these other movies and TV shows, but it's also kind of interesting just to say, okay, we want to watch our characters and see how they will resolve this situation. How will they react to this type of a situation? And that's just fun.
Yeah, which that's actually a perfect segue, because my second choice is not necessarily sci-fi. Okay, it's not sci-fi at all. But it was a Xena episode. And it was one of my favorite Xena episodes. And it was called Been There, Done That.
What if tomorrow never came?
Rise and shine, everybody! Rise and shine!
On the next all-new Xena.
The day is repeating itself. But today hasn't happened yet. Well, it happened to me.
Only Xena can jumpstart the clock.
So you're saying that today is actually yesterday for you, but for us today is today because we can't remember that yesterday was today, right? Right.
But time is not on her side.
Just don't try and stop me.
Been there, done that. Battle on, Xena.
That's great. I watch a lot of Xena, but that's not one that I caught. That's the first time I think I've seen the trailer for that, and that is fantastic, both because it's Xena and because of that style, that 90s,
that
mid-90s
style.
Yeah.
And here's the thing is, so not many people know this, but I am a huge Xena fan. Like, I went to conventions. I have a collection back here. I saw Lucy Lawless in person, did not get to meet her, but I cried like a Justin Bieber fangirl. Okay. It was during a time where, I was going through a lot as a middle schooler. And so Xena was my savior, kind of like she helped me through a lot of stuff. I would record every episode. I had so many VHSs. All the recorded
That's
episodes.
awesome.
The thing is this season 3 was my favorite. There was a lot that happened with the characters. There was a lot going on, but there was also very good bottle episodes or just certain, like, I don't know. Tsunami was in season 3, which was a great Autolycus episode. I think This Is When Hope was introduced, and so there was all this stuff going on. I think this is when her son died, like all that stuff. Well, this one was just a very fun episode. And of course, she, like the girl in Monday, she knew the day was repeating itself. And she didn't know why, though. She was like, what is going on? So every time she would wake up, first day, it was totally fine. But Joxer dies. Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, then she wakes up and Joxer's alive. And she's like, what the heck's going on? Well, on that day, Gabrielle dies. Okay. And so then, but then the next day, all three of them die. Like, but she couldn't really figure out what was going on. But because you start to see her getting annoyed. And at one point, it's always the rooster crowing, and Jocks are coming in with his hat full of eggs and stuff. And by the way, I haven't seen this episode in 25 years. I am doing this out of memory.
Amazing. And by the way, you're selling it because I'm going to go find it someplace and watch it straight away.
It. There's at one point where it loops and she wakes up and she throws the chakram and kills the rooster. There's another moment where she actually just kills Joxer as he walks in, and Gabrielle.
She knows he'll be back the next day.
Because he knows he'll be back. Yeah. I mean, Gabrielle's like, what, and stuff. And she's just like going back to sleep, all cuddling with her blanket. Like it's so funny. Well, then she finds out that it has to do with kind of a Romeo and Juliet situation where there was two houses that were against each other, but there was two of each family that were in love. They didn't think that they were able to get married. You saw the girl with the vial of poison. She tries to kill herself. So the fiance or her boyfriend or whatever he was called to the gods to, find a savior to help save the love of his life. And that happened to be Xena. And so she had to try and figure out so many different ways of like, okay, I have to stop this, and this, so then this doesn't happen. And it's hilarious. Like, absolutely. A lot of these episodes that we're mentioning or the movies, this is a funny episode.
And I can imagine, particularly because Xena's characters, she gets frustrated. She's a person of action. And so if she's trying to solve a puzzle, I know that's not her favorite situation to be in. I can imagine, even having not seen the episode, I can very clearly imagine how Lucy Lawless would play the frustration on Xena's face as she's trying to navigate this ridiculous scenario that the gods have put her into.
At the end of the promo, though, you see her wake up and she's like, she's all mad because she looped multiple times. I think what is in Cause and Effect, they did it 17 days.
They said 17 days.
Like
yeah. Although how many time loops, I don't know, because the time loop's not necessarily a day.
That's true. That is true. So what was interesting though, she definitely did more 17. Like every time she's like, oh, made a mistake, well, try again the next time, but it's a fun episode. Absolutely love it. But yeah, I had to bring that up. It's not sci-fi, but it is a love of mine.
First of all, I think it counts, partly because arguably neither of my choices are fully sci-fi. So, I want to be on the good side of things here. But also one thing that's great about Xena and why I enjoyed it so much was I think Xena, it's of course, again, totally different setup than Star Trek, but like Star Trek generally, and particularly TOS, Xena, the producers, the writers, the actors, they were so good at doing so much with so little, right? It was not a huge budget show, especially not at the beginning. And they were able to cobble together brilliant sets, brilliant props. They got really great actors who were enthusiastic, including not just the main actors, but they always had great guest actors and extras. Everyone just seemed so down to have a good time and put on an excellent show. And I like that vibe. And it's great that the Star Trek franchise has gotten to the point where it's long been a big budget show, but back in the TOS days, they're putting on great entertainment by focusing on telling a great story and doing it as best as they can, even when it's clearly styrofoam rocks and spray painted stuff. But your brain doesn't care because the story is a good story, and the actors and everybody involved are just putting their all into it. So I think it totally fits. It totally fits.
Yay, I'm glad. I do know that there are a lot of Star Trek fans that love Beverly Crusher and also love Xena, so it works out. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Lucy Lawless, huge fan of Xena. Always, forever, have my heart. However, I only saw the series finale once, and that is all I'm ever going to do because I bawled like a little baby, and it ruined. I was 16 years old. I'm still traumatized. I do not like how they ended it. I understand why, but still, I'm not happy.
A lot of people feel that way about Star Trek Enterprise.
Well, yeah, that's true. That one was just ridiculous.
I know it's like a different reaction, but yeah.
But I get it. I mean, it's not fair to what I thought of. It wasn't fair to the cast of the show to end it the way that they did. But the way that they ended Xena was very traumatic. I'm not gonna lie. But let's go ahead to your two choices.
Sure.
And this first one is called Run, Lola, Run. All right. I feel like that was sci-fi-ish.
Well, so first of all, Run Lola Run, or Lola Rennt in German, it's a German film. Franca Potente, before she became famous in Hollywood, doing all the Hollywood work that she did. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I think it came out in 1998. I saw it not long after that. I was in college. I don't even know how I heard about it. I was doing a lot of film classes at the time, so I probably heard about it from somebody and acquired it somehow. And it is a time loop episode. It's a time loop movie in that the premise is that Lola and her boyfriend, he's a sort of a 2-bit criminal, like a low rent criminal guy. And he basically, he's doing a drug deal drop where he's got to get the money for some big drug deal. He gives the people the drugs, he gets the money, he forgets it on, I think the subway or something. He loses the money, and basically he calls up Lola and he's like, if I don't find 100,000 Deutschmarks or whatever, I'm dead. And so this sets into motion Lola basically running around town trying to get the money together for her boyfriend to save his life. And he's basically said, if you can't get the money, I'm going to rob this store, which would be an even bigger crime than he had previously really been involved with. Mm-hmm. I won't spoil it, because I do recommend people should go see this movie. It's not long. It's really, really good. I highly recommend watching it in German with subtitles, because Franca Potente and the other actors really, there's so much emotion involved in this story. But the main difference from Cause and Effect and some of these other stories is similar to the Xena story. Lola can remember the previous cycles in the time loop. And I say it's not sci-fi, but there's no explanation as to why she's in a time loop. But what's kind of cool is the impression you get from the film that she is in a time loop just out of force of sheer will. She's so desperate to solve this problem that her boyfriend has got himself into, that her will forces the universe to give her more chances to try to resolve this issue. And it's just a pulse pounding, fast paced, amazing film. For folks who haven't seen it, I think you'll really, really be pleased by checking it out and adding it to your library of time loop episodes.
Right. I was watching the promo and I was like, I think this is something my husband might enjoy. He does like those kind of stories, like what's in Inception?
Oh yeah, Inception's
so that's like, he likes those weird kind of
What's better about Run Lola Run? I like Inception, and I like Chris Nolan movies in general. They tend to be very high concept, very interesting, very well executed. But what gives the edge to a movie like Run Lola Run is that emotional aspect. There is rage, there is joy, and Franca Potente just does such a brilliant job with it. People who haven't seen that movie definitely need to check it out.
All right. Well, let's get into your second choice here that I was very interested in watching myself. So here is the promo for it. And it is called Palm Springs.
I don't think that we met. I'm Sarah.
Niles.
guys. Niles?
Don't come in here!
What
It's gonna be a beautiful wedding.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about. The second you fall asleep, it all just goes back to the start.
Well, then what's the point of living?
We kind of have no choice but to live.
No, I'm gonna get out of this.
See you tomorrow.
I can't keep waking up in here.
At least you have each other.
Everything that we are doing is meaningless.
Good day so far? Today, tomorrow, it's all the same.
What was
Great.
funny is when I see her get all upset and she's thrashing in the bed, literally what Xena did.
I think I've done that a few times too, out of frustration.
I know.
Yeah,
So
Palm
why was this your
Springs.
other pick?
Oh, because it's a great movie, and it's one of those ones that I think suffered a little during the pandemic, because it came out in 2020, right in that sort of COVID pandemic time, where everything was up in the air. It was only released into a few theaters. And I think it came out in theaters and Hulu at the same time. I believe it's still on Hulu. I could be wrong about that, but that's definitely where it was for a while. But it is more overtly sci-fi, in that there is talk of quantum mechanics and all this other stuff. Although that being said, it's also got this sort of fantasy element. There's definitely, as I was saying before, this is one of those stories that really has sort of a philosophical aspect to it about the meaning of life, fate, romance, all what do these things all mean, and is it something other than just the sum of the physical parts, that sort of thing. And Andy Samberg, Kristen Milioti, and J.K. Simmons is in it too, in a fantastic sort of side role. And the thing is this shares most in common with Groundhog Day, but they did some pretty brilliant things to do a twist on the Groundhog Day concept. One of them is that Andy Samberg, he's been in this time loop for a long time when the movie has started, right? He's just already in the time loop, right? So it's not something that you're not experiencing it with him as the audience. You are experiencing it with Kristen Milioti, because she's been pulled into this time loop. And for reasons that you discover in the mechanics of the movie, when the movie sort of starts to explain exactly what's going on. And so she's the audience surrogate, and she's dealing with Andy Samberg, and there's pluses and minuses to that. And then all of a sudden J.K. Simmons shows up again, it's as you were saying, these stories often have an opportunity to be humorous. And this is a very funny movie, but also emotionally touching, philosophically interesting. It says some interesting things, and it asks some interesting questions while being thoroughly entertaining throughout. And so when you asked me about some time loop things, this along with the Run Lola Run were the ones that just immediately popped to mind.
I was watching the promo and I was like, I think this is a movie I could see. It's very hard to get me interested in a movie. I don't know what it's been, but like the last decade at least, I just kind of am like, I mean, my aunt, she'll watch any movie at a theater. Husband loves to go to the movie theaters, but I don't know. I just kind of lost interest. And I don't know if it's because movies are just not made the same way they used to be, or especially since the pandemic, that even kind of made it worse. So sometimes people will like recommend things and like, oh, you should watch this. I'm like, yeah, maybe. And I never do.
Well, it's tricky because, I've had the same experience when I was younger. I would go to the movie theater all the time. It was $3. We'd go to the matinees. We'd just watch movies all day.
It's not $3 anymore.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem, right? But and then in college and well beyond that, I regularly would watch movies, including movies that didn't even look that good. I was kind of interested in watching bad movies. I want to know what makes a bad movie. Let me examine why do I not like this movie? But I also think, you time goes on, start getting busy, time starts getting really valuable, right? And then you start thinking, I don't want to I don't want to be watching some nonsense. And so you get gun shy about that, and you rely on things that you have a higher degree of confidence in. You know, I think that's why a lot of us like franchise shows, right? Because they're not all, not every episode is a winner, but you have a certain confidence in the show producers of a certain show or a certain franchise. It can be very comforting. And plus you can always go back and watch the older stuff. And you're like, why would I risk this next hour of my life on this show that might just be nonsense when I can just go watch Cause and Effect? Exactly. And I know I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to be so happy having watched that. And so I think the calculus just sort of changes as time goes on. It'd be nice. I wish I had the luxury to just watch a bunch of bad movies all day, but
I know.
It's hard to sort through all that stuff.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's something about TV shows that I was always interested in. And the one show that comes to mind is Bones. And it was a comfort show that I would just constantly watch. And I mean, from the day I discovered it, which I was pregnant with my daughter in 2000, up until I discovered The Next Generation, which is 2022, Bones played every single day house from that time span. And it was just, and I wasn't like I was sitting down watching it. It was on the TV. It just played. It was a comfort show. It was in the background. I fell asleep to it. My daughter still falls asleep to it. She has the DVDs in her room right now, and she plays it and she goes to sleep. It was just something about the show that I really enjoyed. And my husband was always like, watch something else. And I'm like,
I've heard that from my wife as well. I tend to cycle through shows, but it'll be King of the Hill for a few years, or Bob's Burgers. X-Files is a go-to. I once did a watch through a few years back. I did a watch through episode 1 to the end of the latest episodes of X-Files. And my wife she never didn't say anything about it. She's like, okay, cool. And then after I watched the series finale to X-Files, I immediately loaded up the pilot episode, and my wife was like, no, what are you doing? And I was like, no. I'm just watching it to compare. I'm not going to do another watch through right now.
It's like, no, do it.
But it is comforting, right? It is a comforting thing. And that's such a value that these television programs provide us, because we joke around about it, but the psychological value of having those shows that you can have some confidence in, that they'll make you feel better. It's like having a favorite food or something, except fewer calories.
Fewer calories.
Yeah, it's a lot healthier, I think, to watch TNG than to eat Milka chocolate or Kinder Eggs.
Unless you're watching TNG all day and just sitting on the couch. That's not too healthy, I guess. Yeah. But it was funny because the first thing that actually got me out of Bones, or was kind of in the mix, was X-Files. My husband got me to watch that because that's his second favorite show of all time. Went through that, watched through, and then the moment TNG, that took over, and that's all over the place. But right now I can't watch any TV in my room. Like the Wi-Fi doesn't work. My Blu-ray broke.
Oh, no.
So I have one channel that works through the antenna, and it's a mystery channel. So right now I've been watching MacGyver, the new MacGyver.
Oh, I haven't seen the new MacGyver.
Yeah, NCIS New Orleans. So I was like, at least I'm going to be watching Scott Bakula. So that's good. They do show Bones. Went back to CSI Miami. That was a comfort show of mine. So I'm just watching those and repeat, and I'm all like, well, at least I'm watching new shows now, right?
Well, I think that actually you've described a scenario that I think might actually also go back to what you were talking about before, about having, in more recent years, having a little bit of trouble getting into watching movies or some of these newer things. And I think part of it is while undoubtedly, I prefer the streaming era. I prefer having access to all old stuff. I love all the new stuff that's coming out. I do like that there's the variety. I like so much specifically that TV shows are being produced for a much broader set of audiences, right? So it's not just targeting this one demographic, right?
Right.
Which is a problem. So I undoubtedly, I like all of that. However, I also realize that the lifting of those restrictions in some ways is what makes it harder for us to discover those things, like when you have only one channel that comes in. Well, I remember being a kid and there's only one channel that works, or two, or there's three channels that work, but two of them aren't interested in. So you sit there and you watch what's being shown to you, and that's gone for the most part, because why would we do that? We'll pick the thing we want to watch. And it has been interesting to see some of the streaming services like Paramount Plus and some of the others put on these sort of live channels where they just will play, for example, South Park or something just over and over, or TNG. They have the Star Trek channel. And so it's sort of replicating that. You still have to go pick it. But it is interesting to see some of them, the streaming channels, experimenting with this idea of the throwback to, I don't want to have any cognitive load in terms of picking what I'm going to watch. Right. You show me something, I'll enjoy it or not, but I'll rely on you to show me something interesting.
And that's kind of why I liked Pluto TV, because as much as all their channels are already set for you, you can kind of like, oh, the I Love Lucy channel. Oh, there's the Mystery channel. And, First 48 was one of those dramas, real life dramas that I loved to watch. And so that would be played, and of course they have a Star Trek channel, so I have to watch that. But that kind of, so then I would just put the channel on and just be done. Right? Because it's just plain. Yeah. So it just made it easier to watch. And but there's just something about like we were just talking about earlier. It's just when you have a comfort show, you just want to watch that comfort show, especially when you've had like a long day at work or stressed about something. You need some comfort. And Star Trek brings that, and I learned that late. But at least I learned it, right?
And we're so happy that you did, because you've been doing all this awesome stuff, because you're a recent convert to Star Trek. You're not like some of us.
Not even 3 years.
Slogging through this for eternity. But it is, look, I do a Star Trek podcast too, obviously. And it's so fun for so many reasons, interacting with wonderful folks like you and the fans, and getting to entertain and all that. But really, one of the best things about it is I have a structured reason why I have to watch Star Trek every week. And that's great. I love it. I love not having any excuse. I was like, I have to watch this episode at least once, if not 2 or 3 times, so I can do a good job, right, on my podcast. Yeah. And it's a joy to be able to do that. So in some ways, very, very, very selfish. This is definitely not a selfless act doing a Star Trek podcast, because it's like we get to watch a great show and have fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you mentioned that, because that's also my excuse to, my kid or my husband or anyone, like, oh, well, I got to watch some Star Trek because, I got a live here in a couple of days. I got to prepare.
Got to do my homework.
Got to do my homework. Yeah. Except for me and Xena, which that's ingrained in my memory forever. But yeah, and like I said, today's Star Trek Day, and, we're celebrating the franchise of the last 58 years. And it's just a testament of these 58 years of why the fans love the shows, all of them. We're already way past 900 episodes and 13 movies or something. And it's one of those things where you just enjoy it. It has great conversations. That was one of the things that I learned and why I did the podcast. When I had first started the podcast, it was on Twitter Space. And I had done Cause and Effect, and I had talked to a few people about it. But, after watching it over and over again and kind of getting more of an idea, or even comparing it to Monday or Been There, Done That, it's like, oh, they did it like this when they, and they were really the first ones. It was in 92. It was so, just unheard of for them to do that. And so that was what was also really great, is that Star Trek really paved the way for a lot of shows.
Absolutely.
And so I always make the joke of what came first was, because they say the Scully effect, where a lot of women went into science and STEM because of Dana Scully. But I always made the joke. I was like, well, what came first? Because Beverly Crusher was before Scully, but then Scully's in the 20th century. Well, Beverly Crusher's in the 20th century. So what in this timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly situation came first? But even Gates has said that people have come up to her and said, I went into medicine or I went into science because they watched Beverly Crusher. So it's not even just the Scully effect. It's just the overall of these sci-fi shows engaging people and wanting them to be like, this looks like a cool job. I'm going to want to do this, or they want to make Star Trek come true. Like, I'm going to help make biobeds or, tricorders or whatever that is in our future. Replicator would be great because I don't have time to cook. Like, I'm just saying.
3D printed pasta.
Exactly. That's
Neelix's hair pasta. We just covered parturition from Voyager, where Neelix serves the crew hair pasta. And it is exactly what you think it is. What you think it is.
I remember that episode. I really do. Now, going back to cause and effect, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the tricorder rating.
By tricorder.
All right. So I asked the listeners to vote. I got 55 votes, and it was pretty much a landslide. 71% gave it 5 poker chips, which is the top one. 4 orchids was 15%, and there was a tie between 3 wine glasses or 1 and 2 exploding enterprises at 7. I was kind of actually surprised that people even rated it 1 to 2.
Me too. I'm not surprised how many rated it well. But it's subjective in the end.
Maybe they just don't like Beverly Crusher. I'm just saying.
Some people might, or they've I can. While I think they did a very good job of avoiding the repetition, I could also see, depending on how much nuance you're focusing on, etc., you might watch this episode and think, okay, I get it.
I'm done.
or depending on when you saw it, right? Because it is this, like anything classic often gets compared to the 50 things afterwards that did the same thing. And sometimes they do it better or in a different way that engages with people more. So it's like sometimes, people, watch a Shakespeare play and be like, nah, I've seen this before. It's like, yeah, but it came from here. This is where it came from,
Exactly.
But I mean, it is subjective, but I'm with that 71%. This is
me too.
Right at the top for me.
Yeah, this is a fan favorite for a lot of people. Actually, even the Sci-Fi Sisters had mentioned, they're like, that is in our top 10 favorite Star Trek episodes, and I was all like, I believe it, because so is mine. But I do want to real fast mention the passing of James Darren, who of course played Vic Fontaine on DS9. I mean, he lived a great life, 88 years old. But yeah, it was sad to hear of his passing. And of course, I think I retweeted that he's with Aaron and they're together again. I think Jay was like, this is too early to be playing with my emotions. I'm like, speak of the truth, man. I'm just saying. But I wanted to mention that everyone has just, said amazing things about James. And of course, James has this amazing career, I mean, Gidget. Let's just look at right there. Right,
he was
there
on TJ Hooker too with Shatner.
Yeah. So I mean, and it was just great to see James Darren and Star Trek.
And he's a brilliant singer and so charismatic. And I remember at the time there were people who weren't big fans of Vic Fontaine, of the character he played on Deep Space Nine. I think that it wasn't the majority of people at the time, I don't think, but I certainly think that sentiment has receded somewhat for most people, even those who used to think that, not just because there are specific episodes where he just does a brilliant job, But because the purpose of the character is just adding this flavor and giving a very different type of personality for the crew, the Starfleet crew to bounce off of. I think just from a literary standpoint was a very clever tool that they introduced into this show. And I'm always really excited when you can lift something up as an example of a good writing, a good example of what you might do in your own creative endeavors. And then when the person who's embodying that is somebody like James Darren, and you're like, wow, this is so fantastic. They were so lucky to be able to cast him to do this, to fill that role and really make it his own.
Well, I think we've been lucky with a lot of actors that have been able to grace our screens. I mean, just help me out here because my brain does not work. But she, oh dear, on DS9, she was the.
I'll talk about Nana Visitor.
No, she.
Very Farrell.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Nest. Yes. Well, now you've made me forget her name, but I know who you're talking about.
I can't even remember her character's name. Oh my god!
I will remember it once we stop talking about this.
We finish. But I mean, just
another Beverly Crusher swig here.
You know, I probably should have just Googled this prior to before my brain stopped working. But just having
evil
her
Kai
on,
Wynn, yeah.
Yes, Kai Wynn. Yes. It was just
Fletcher. Her name was wasn't it Fletcher? Louise Fletcher.
Louise Fletcher. Look at that. You're faster than Google.
I needed some of my Beverly juice, and that
it worked. See, Beverly is just the perfect example of Star Trek, right?
Okay, real quick before I forget, because I remember this now. When you were reading the script to that scene that you'd showed of her in the bedroom, you mentioned that in the script it said she had a glass of water, but in the show, obviously, it's clearly not water. She's got some sort of aperitif of some sort. I don't know what it was.
She's going to sleep, getting a little.
I'm thinking maybe some sort of elderflower liqueur or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm
My
guessing.
husband calls it Dimetap because it's purple and it's so little. He's like, she's drinking Dimetap, and I'm like, she could be.
I find I did not know that the script said it was water, and it's I don't know. To me, that really changes the scene. And I'm wondering who came up with that idea. I would not be surprised if it was Gates McFadden herself, who's saying, I think Beverly would be getting ready for bed. She's in this luxurious nightgown, dressing gown, I guess you'd call it. She's clipping her orchids, reading a leather-bound book. Yeah, I can imagine Gates saying like, no, she would be having something to, ease her mind before sleep, get her into that relaxed mode. But I don't know. I just wanted to mention that because when you said that was a glass of water in the script, I was like, whoa, I don't know why. To me, that scene plays differently if it's just a little tumbler of water that she's like, all right, taking some fiber pills. I gotta go to bed.
Yeah, I mean, now when you're watching the scene, you're like, water. Have you done cause and effect on your show yet?
We did it a long time ago. I thought about going back and listening to that our episode of It's Got Star Trek that we did on cause and effect, but I opted not to. But maybe I'll go back and I haven't listened. Especially those old podcasts that we've been doing it for, I don't know, 5 years now or something. We're on.
There's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, we just did episode 254, and that's not even counting like bonus and extra episodes. So we've been at it for a while, and that was way early. We did it early because it was it's one of all of our favorites, all the hosts on the It's Got Star Trek podcast. So I'm kind of curious. I do remember that one thing we harped on about was how scary it was that the ship keeps looming and Data is just sort of casually saying like, oh, I think we should use the tractor beam. And this is the background. The ship is just
coming right at him.
You're like, oh my God. We all have a competency fetish, but I don't know if that's competence. I'm going to delay us a little bit by calmly stating my suggestion. Anyway.
I mean, Riker did it calmly, just faster.
He did. Yeah, a little faster.
A little fast. more desperate. Like,
Yeah.
let's figure this out in 2 seconds.
It's like there's a giant ship that's about to smash right into us.
What do we do? But you know what, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about your favorite episode and all these fun sci-fi and not so sci-fi time loop episodes and movies. I hope you had fun today,
Mhm.
but tell the audience where they can find you.
Oh, all right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I was so excited when you reached out to me and you wanted to have me back. It's always that it's nice to come on. It's even nicer to come back. It's like, oh, I guess I did something right.
Yay!
So thanks for that. And I had a wonderful time. And again, just as I said, doing a podcast is a great excuse to watch Star Trek. This was an added excuse to watch Star Trek, but also, to look up all the facts. That's part of the fun too. So thanks a lot. Folks who may be interested in our podcast, which is nominally called the It's Got Star Trek podcast. That's what we generally call it. And as advertised, it's a Star Trek podcast. If you'd like to check us out, you can go to itsgotstartrek.com or search for us on any of the podcast players. We are a silly podcast. We try to have fun. We every week we discuss an episode of Star Trek, bouncing around the whole Star Trek universe. And when there's new shows on, we do weekly coverage of the new shows. But we try to have fun. We all love Star Trek. We don't have any negative thoughts, even if we maybe don't like a particular episode here or there, but we always try to approach things in a positive way and a goofy, fun way. And we're often successful. So I'll tell if folks are curious, if you're wondering if you'd like our show, my recommendation is go back a couple episodes, listen to our episode on Rascals. I forget that was episode.
That was fun.
251 to something like that. It's recent. That's one of my favorite episodes that we've done, certainly in recent times. Rascals is of course a great episode for a variety of reasons. And I think we were just firing on all cylinders that week. So I think that's a good one to listen to if you're unsure. Otherwise, pop on a recent one and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yes. I particularly enjoyed your Sub Rosa.
Oh yeah.
I was all like, oh, here we go. I mean, honestly though, I was pleasantly surprised.
Great. I appreciate that.
I think like I said, I'm 30 years late to the party. People love making fun of that episode. It's totally fine.
Well, I really credit you with shifting my view on that episode a little bit too. And it comes down again to that fact that, it's that, when you're watching it, I watched that episode. I was probably 13, 14 years old. I was exactly the age where you're like, this is ridiculous and hilarious. And a little titillating. But and I watched it many times since, and you start to you see it in different ways. But your perspective, and for folks who haven't heard your perspective yet, you did it not too long ago with Danny. I thought you did a really good job on that. I know you've discussed it in multiple venues, but you really do help reconceptualize that episode in a lot of ways, and there's some really positive stuff. And there's still goofy stuff. It's an odd episode in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I really was very impressed with your take. Have been, because I've heard you give your take multiple times, and again for the very few number of folks who haven't heard your take yet, they really ought to, because I think it's not only a good take. I think it's an important perspective.
Especially for the character of Beverly Crusher, because
Absolutely.
She does get put down for it a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if you just look at it just a little differently, it might, I'm not going to change everyone's perspective, obviously. And I'm not going to tell everyone to stop cracking jokes or whatever. It is what it is. Yeah. But, you might be able to enjoy it, seeing it in a different light. No pun intended, because it's you're welcome. I'm here all week. When the brain's working, it happens. But I think in this case, it's just, there are just specific episodes that I'd like to discuss and really break, peel back the onion, if you will, of just exploring those things. And like you said, it's really fun to go into the deep dive and fun facts and how they created it, what they had, how the actors approached it. So I always enjoyed that kind of stuff. And so when I figured that I could really do this with Star Trek and I could talk with other people and all, it just made it so much more fun because I've always been a creative person. Like when I was a Xena fan, I'm telling you, I was 10 and 16. That was my life of all Xena. I made websites. I had fan fiction. I made scripts. I mean,
do you have
I
any
was
screenshots of those websites, or do they
not
lurk
anymore.
somewhere on GeoCities
No.
or something?
I had GeoCities and I had Angel Fire. Those were my things. Yeah, I learned HTML coding just to create these websites, right? And I think also it was just I just loved creating this kind of stuff, and I was continuing it with Days of Our Lives and Once Upon a Time, and I just grew to enjoy it. But unfortunately, some fandoms are not the greatest. Okay, and so made it not fun anymore. But with Star Trek, it's just always fun. Like even after over 2 years that I've been doing this, it's just always been fun to interact and create things and just, this is kind of like, I always say, this is my therapy, right?
Oh yeah.
Come back from
I'm
work.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's just, it makes it really nice to just release all of that stress and talk about stuff that you enjoy and then even learning new things.
And it's a big fandom, and it's a diverse fandom, which I think is part of what's brilliant about it, because there are a number of shows that I love, but it could be that the fandom is just so small that they're all great people, but there's just not enough. There's not the threshold hasn't been met for enough people to really generate the community that that has been built up around Star Trek. And there are negative aspects of the Star Trek community, but they tend to be sort of sequestered and pocketed away, unlike some other fandoms that we know that we might even be a part of, where it's a little bit more of an overt problem, right? And it's nice to just people have your back, and I think that's part of the Star Trek fandom that's so fantastic. And you can meet people from around the world. And we've had this opportunity to meet fans that have traveled around. We see them in other countries, or they happen to be visiting where we live, and get to interact with them in person. And I mean, I know that exists in some other fandoms, but I think probably Star Trek is the fandom where that's most likely to happen. Anywhere in the world you can go, you can run into somebody who would just love to sit and chat about Cause and Effect or Sub Rosa or any of those.
Exactly. I mean, even at the Star Trek convention, people were like, "You're a Crusher Convo." And I'm like, how do you know who I am? Right. But it was cool because then it was like, we really enjoy what you're saying. So I'm like, okay, I'm not being an idiot. But I've learned so much from this fandom versus the other fandoms. The other fandoms could be too toxic in the sense that you get caught in that toxicity. Well, this one, it's like, no, I can state my piece and be fine with it. But I could also just, walk away and just do what I enjoy and just not have to deal with anything else. So, I've definitely learned a lot in that aspect. And I feel like, I think I even told this to Aaron Wolke, where I was like, I feel like I've become a better person because of it. And he was all like, that's what Star Trek's about. And I was like, there we go.
I think so too. I would say the same thing about myself. I think it was a fortunate thing when I was a young kid. And I remember I saw commercials for Star Trek. I thought it was scary and terrifying. I had no interest in it. And I think, by the way, talking about that, being stuck on one channel, I think that's exactly what happened. It was Nickelodeon or something. I saw TAS. That was what was on the TV.
Oh,
and I had to watch it. I fell in love with it. And as soon as I finished TAS, I started watching the original series. And then that's when I got into TNG and started watching it week to week from that point forward. And I think part of it is, I know there's a million different stories they tell, but so many of the stories center on being empathetic, being intelligent, being competent, being a team member. And if that's what attracts you to the show, then when it comes to the fans, there's a high probability that the fans are going to have that same attitude, or are going to want to adopt that same attitude because they see something in that impresses them and they want to be more like that. So I definitely think the show can make you a better person. And I think that a lot of people who watch the show are pretty awesome people. That's been my experience. And it's just fantastic.
No, well, thanks to the franchise, I've got to meet amazing people like you and, Cameron, Green Shirt,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's just so many people, I mean, even I've gotten to meet with Tim and FSF Popcast and things like that. And he's starting to watch Star Trek for the first time. So it's
I
just
know,
been
it's great,
really,
isn't it?
I know it's so awesome. So
It keeps growing.
keeps growing. We're just reeling people in. But you know what, guys? If you want to find me, you can always subscribe, like, share, and comment here on YouTube. And as you can see, it is Star Trek Day. So I hope you guys are celebrating and having fun doing what you need to do today. If you want more Crusher content, you could also find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you love to listen to your audio podcasts. You can buy Crusher Convo merch over at TeePublic. You can support the podcast by buying me a coffee. Just scan that QR code on the top right corner, and you can find all this information on crusherconvo.com. So yeah, this was great. Thank you, Patrick, so much. I had a blast.
Thank you.
I'm
Me
so
too.
happy we got to discuss this. So, we have to do this again.
Absolutely.
Now, guys, I am going to be taking a little bit of a break. So this is going to be the last episode for this month. I might be dropping a couple bonus episodes. We'll see. But my first live back will be Beverly Crusher Day, where I'll be discussing Nana Visitor's new book, Women of Trek. So I'm very, very excited about that. And then after that, I will be deep diving, just like Patrick here, with his trio of It's Got Star Trek. We'll be reviewing season 5 and the final season of Lower Decks. So, and that I will be closing up my season 2. So it's been a great year coming back. I thank everyone who has supported me, just like you, Patrick. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, guys, I guess that's everything. Live long and prosper. Thank you, Patrick. Have fun, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Crusher out.